Welcome to A Leader's Journey, the podcast for leaders who deeply believe there is a better way to lead and desire to create their unique journey towards becoming a legacy leader. I'm your host, Shannon Hammond. Over the last 20 years as a corporate leader and leadership performance coach, I've learned that many leaders believe there is a predefined path they have to follow and struggle leaning into their unique gifts that will create lasting impact and fulfillment. They end up feeling stuck, unhappy, and unfulfilled in the day-to-day of their role, and are challenged with why, since they have experienced success in their career and in life. I'm here to help leaders think through their leadership journey, learn how to ask themselves better questions, and learn the formula to create their leadership journey by design. If you are ready to design your unique leadership journey, lead with confidence, and love the teams you lead, then you are in the right place. Let's do this. Hello, my friends and fellow leaders. I'm glad to have you back here with me this week on the podcast. And if this is your first time tuning in, welcome. I'm so happy that you are here. I know that your time is valuable, and I'm grateful that you've chosen to spend some of it here with me today, and that you are taking the time to invest in your development as a leader. Today, we are going to dive into the 5 biggest mistakes that new leaders make, and more importantly, how to avoid them. If you're a new leader, you might be making some of these mistakes and not even realize it. So stay tuned in because we're going to chat all about it today. When you get promoted into a new role, mistakes are going to happen. It's part of the learning journey. This is no different for leaders, especially when you move into your first leadership role. You're learning new tasks, how to interact with others as a leader, what your role is as the leader of the team, and more importantly, you're learning who you are as a leader because that is different from who you were as an individual contributor. It's a lot to take on. Things are going to get missed, balls are going to drop, mistakes are going to happen. If that's a fear of yours as a new leader, I'm going to tell you to accept it now and embrace it, because if it hasn't happened yet, I promise you it will, and everything will be okay when it does. There are several misconceptions, though, about leadership and getting promoted into leadership. Once you are the leader, people assume that you have all the answers from day one. You might even feel like you should have all of the answers on day one. When we look at it, Friday, you were the individual contributor. You had your role that you needed to complete. Monday, you are now the leader. And I'm here to tell you that there isn't a magic switch that gets flipped over the weekend that gives you everything that you need as a leader on your first day. There's no outfit that you can go and change into that is going to make you an experienced leader with every tool that you need. Today, though, I am going to tell you the 5 mistakes that leaders make. So let's dive into those and let's talk through some of those. And I'm going to give you some practical solutions that you can start implementing either today if you are in a leadership role, or things to keep in mind and to help you prepare with when you make that transition. So when you do move into a leadership role, you can have some awareness about it. I am going to tell you sometimes you might lean into some of these habits, and that's okay. You're human. And again, mistakes are going to happen. You just need to know how and have the awareness to know how and when you need to pivot and when you might need to step into doing something just a little bit different. All right, let's dive in. Mistake number 1 that new leaders make is micromanaging their teams instead of empowering them. Leaders often think, especially new leaders, that they need to control everything. They are the boss after all, and they are going to be held accountable for the results. So a lot of times leaders think that they have to make every decision, that they have to be connected all the time to every single thing that their team members are doing. And they start stepping back into that individual contributor role and start doing the work and taking things off their team's plates versus being the leader where you need to be able to get those things done through others. One of the things that leaders can do, and a practice that you need to get comfortable implementing, I would say right from the start. So, this is why this is number one, is really stepping into delegation. New leaders need to be able to delegate effectively and trust your team that when you delegate to them that they're going to get done what you asked and when you asked. Now, that's not to say that you just hand off work with some blind faith and no inspection along the way. There is a proper way for you to delegate. You can't just wash your hands of it and be like, here you go, I gave it to you, and expect it to come back perfect, right? So if you are struggling with delegation, or it's just something that you're not comfortable with, or maybe it's a skill that you just don't have a lot of experience in, I'm going to link episode number 21 down in the notes. That is the episode. It's called The Art of Delegation. And in that episode, I discussed with you why delegating really is important. And I shared some practical tips to help you get started with delegating and to make sure that when you delegate, you do so successfully. Now, every single one isn't going to go perfect. You're going to have to work through some trial and error with it. Take a listen to that episode though, because that will help prepare you for ways that you can set yourself up and set your team up to be successful when you start delegating tasks to them. The second mistake that new leaders often make is avoiding the difficult conversations. Tough conversations are a part of leadership. And when you're new to the role, you are trying to establish a relationship with your team. You're trying to get them to know, like, and trust you. And new leaders have a tendency to think that, well, if I approach the conversation softly, or if I just avoid the conversation, that whatever it is, that issue, the behavior, that it's just going to go away. You can't sweep things under the rug and expect that they're going to get fixed. And at some point, you avoiding that conversation is now going to turn from a performance issue for your team member to a performance issue for you. Or you're going to avoid that difficult conversation thinking that you were building into that relationship. Yet there will be a time when those tables will turn, and now that other person that you're supposed to be in a relationship or a partnership with is going to start losing some faith and trust in you, especially if they knew that you were aware of something that maybe they were doing wrong, or maybe they said something that was incorrect, or how they were showing up was having a negative impact on others. And when they find out that you knew and you didn't have their back, you're now going to erode trust. Avoiding the difficult conversation doesn't make things better, it makes them worse. And it may not happen right in that moment. At some point, though, it always does come up. I can tell you from having sat in a leadership role for 20 years, every time I've avoided a conversation, it's come back to me 3 to 4 times more difficult than it was had I just ripped off the Band-Aid and had that conversation right then and there. Now, leaders, you need to learn to be able to approach some of these situations with clarity and with empathy. You don't want to go into them, pointing a finger, because that other person might not have known that what they did was wrong, or that they had incorrect information that they shared. Yet in those difficult conversations, you need to be very clear. Clear is kind. Don't beat around the bush, right? Get right to the point of what it is that you needed to talk to that person about and what you needed to address with them. Be clear, approach it with empathy, and that conversation will go well. And you might even find that that person thanks you for bringing that to their attention, because nobody has the intention of being a bad partner or sharing incorrect information. Most of the time it comes from a place of lack of awareness, or they just didn't know. Maybe something changed and they didn't get the memo that it was now different. All right, the third mistake that new leaders make is having a lack of awareness and emotional intelligence. Leadership all starts with being able to know yourself. This is why I love having my clients study their unique human design, because that helps them get in touch with their strengths, how they were actually designed to work. It helps them identify some of their fears. It gives them new language around them. It helps them know when they're leaning into energy that is their own or when they're picking up on energy that might be other people's. It creates this level of self-awareness and a whole new way to be able to get to know you that allows you to lead with more confidence, to lead more authentically, to have that greater level of emotional intelligence. We've talked about emotional intelligence in several other episodes on the podcast. Knowing more about yourself allows you to be able to do that. Another great way for you to help build your self-awareness, and I know that you've heard me talk about this on the podcast many, many times, and I'm going to continue to talk about it, is journaling. You need to be able to implement a journaling practice, and that's where you're going to create a lot of those awarenesses. Journaling allows you to get your thoughts, your feelings, your ideas all down on paper, be able to look back on them and create this habit of self-reflection, which is another key thing that leaders can do to help create that awareness and build their emotional intelligence, is being able to sit back and reflect on situations. You can look back on your week and say, these are the things that went well. Here's where I had some opportunities. These are the things that came up that kind of pushed me off the tracks. I was on maybe a good path and then something came up, and how did I navigate through that, right? Leaders get thrown a lot of curveballs throughout the week. There's a lot of unexpected things that come up. And if you're journaling on a regular basis, you're going to be able to create those awarenesses around, what did I do well in that situation? What do I need to remember for next time? Is this an area that I just don't have really good habits around, or I don't have any habits around, and I need to start implementing them? The other thing that in this area where you can help create some of that self-awareness is really getting feedback, not just from your leader, but from your peers, from your team members, being vulnerable and honest about, here are the things that I'm working on, and please give me feedback on it, right? Even it could be something as small as, maybe you're working on how it is that you speak in a team meeting. You can ask some of your team members, how do you think I showed up? Were the messages that I delivered clear? Can you repeat back to me the messages that I delivered? And then you can check to see, did they understand what you said? And that will help you know if the message that you delivered was clear. You have to have some habits and routines of self-reflection and journaling to really build that self-awareness, to know how you're going to react or respond in different situations. What are the things that are your triggers that are going to make you feel upset or worried or tired or angry or make you really happy? And how do you help then regulate some of that for yourself, so you know how you're going to be responding in different situations, and you can be more intentional than with your behavior and how you show up as a leader. The mistake number 4 that new leaders make is not setting clear priorities. This is not just for your team. You do have to have clear priorities for your team. You also have to be clear on what your priorities are for you in your role as the leader, and be able to set some boundaries around all of them. It is really easy for new leaders to get distracted by everything that is happening in their role. And a lot of new leaders I see, they really struggle to say no, because they want to be involved. They want to learn. They want to feel like they are part of the team and that they're doing their part. A lot of new leaders also feel like if they can take on all of these things, they'll learn and grow faster, and that will help them move up in their leadership journey and progress their leadership journey faster. And that is not always the case. You have to really focus on what truly moves the needle, what is your responsibility as a leader, and be very clear with your team on what their priorities need to be every day. Or it could be every month, week, year, whatever it is that your focus is going to be. This is where setting goals is very helpful, because that does set the tone and send the message of this is our priority this year. So if your priority might be to, increase efficiencies or increase client satisfaction, you will have goals that are around that goals built around that you are consistently checking in on with yourself and that you are talking to your team about. And their goals should also then have a component of that built into it, right? As they're working on things for themselves, how does that then increase efficiencies or increase client service or whatever your goal is, if focus is for the year? You also need to be able to clearly communicate them and communicate them on a regular basis. Priorities are not something that you share at the beginning of the year in January and expect that your team, as they go throughout the year, is going to remember them. You need to communicate them on a regular basis with your team. What you focus on is what you find. What messages you share with your team regularly helps them stay focused on that on a regular basis. There's a lot that's going to happen throughout the day, not just for your team, but for you as a leader. There's going to be other things that are going to be coming at you and your team that will easily move you off of what your priorities are. However, if you have them written down in a place that you can check in on them on a regular basis, and you're doing that and you're communicating them on a regular basis with your team, and you're sharing checkpoints. Here's the progress that we made. Here's the progress we didn't made. And let's talk about what we need to do differently in the upcoming month, week, quarter, whatever it is, to start making some progress on that. When you're doing that, it is going to make it really easy for you to say, no, this is not a priority for us this year. This is going to go in the parking lot list, and we'll come back to that, in a future quarter, in a future year, whatever that may be. It's going to allow you to be able to set those boundaries so you know exactly what it is that you're working on. And again, you're not trying to take on everything from everybody and juggle all these balls that you can't. You're one person, right? And you want to make sure that every single year you're making meaningful progress on what is the top priority. And you have to be clear on what that is. All right, so we covered 4 of the biggest mistakes. 1, micromanaging instead of empowering your team. The second biggest mistake was avoiding difficult conversations. The third was a lack of self-awareness and emotional intelligence in the leader. And the fourth biggest mistake that new leaders make was not setting clear priorities. So the last one, the 5th biggest mistake that new leaders make, is they are trying to be liked instead of respected. This is a hard one because everybody wants their teams to like them. I want my teams to like me too. Yet at the end of the day, I want them to respect me more than they like me. Because if you think about some of the other mistakes that we make, leaders are going to have difficult conversations. When you're focused on being liked, you avoid those difficult conversations. When you're focused on being liked, you're trying to make them your friend. You might not be as honest. You might not be as clear. You might not be as direct as you need to be with your team members. Leaders who are trying to be liked, they let things slide. They get easily taken advantage of. And then they find themselves in a place where their performance isn't meeting expectations, or they're not getting promoted, or their team is struggling. And they might even be having then a conversation with their leader about what they're going to start doing differently because performance is suffering within the team. There's a lot of different things that can come up from that. What new leaders really need to focus on is being respected. You do this through really focusing on earning trust within your team, your peers, your key stakeholders, your leader, through integrity and consistency, rather than trying to get approval or likes, right? Showing up the same way every single day, being consistent in the messages that you're delivering. If you're saying that we are a culture that we pick up the phone first. You need to lead by example. That's where that integrity comes in, is walking the walk and talking the talk. You need to be picking up the phone, and you need to be consistent in that message that you're delivering to your team. Don't turn around and say, okay, today we're going to send out all emails and we're not going to answer the phone. If picking up the phone is something that's important for your group, then you need to be consistent with that. You need to be consistent in your decisions. If you're constantly wishy-washy and this week it's A, next week it's B, the next week it might be F, the next week it's A, like whatever that answer is, you have to show up on a consistent basis. And for some leaders, that might mean that you've got to write a lot of things down and you have to have a place that you store them in your notes. That is something that I do for myself. I have a OneNote notebook that I use, and a lot of decisions that I make, I write them down in my notebook, so that way I have them to reference back to. So when something else comes up or somebody asks me about whatever it may be, I have something that I can reference back to and remind myself, and I'm not relying on my memory to help me stay consistent. If I say there's only one person out of PTO a day, and I start approving people to have two, right? Or somebody asks about it, I can go back to say, no, this is where I communicated. This is our policy for this year, and this is what we need to be able to stick to. And here's the why behind that. That helps your team make better decisions. That helps you as a leader make better decisions. And that's where your team is going to respect you, even when you have to deliver that hard message, even when you have to tell them no. They're going to know it because you have been consistent with that. Another great example that I can share with you, and it's one that has come up recently, as we are setting individual goals for the year. My team knows that there is a certain framework that I look for in their goals, that we are going to focus on the quality of tasks, and growth needs to be achieved through their goals, that they can't just show up and have these check the box items. And they know that. So when they bring their goal to me, it's much easier for us to write them, because the last several years I've been very consistent in how I coach them through that process. So they know if they bring me a goal and it only has a couple action items on it, and these are super easy things that they're going to be able to do in their sleep, they know they're going to be sent back to the drawing board. And not one of them even came with that as their items, right? Most of them came with, here's what I have. I've got to start on it. This is something that this is a task I think is going to help me achieve my goal. I know it's not going to challenge me enough to do it this way. Can we talk through, and can you help me look at how I can modify this task or look for something different, because I know that this isn't going to be challenging enough. And as a leader, that's exactly what I want to hear from my team. Yet it also makes it easier for us to set goals, because I'm not having to write them or constantly redirect them. And I can tell you from experiences for the last couple years, my team loves the way that I set goals with them, because they know that they're growing, right? At first, it's kind of a turnoff, and they're like, oh, this is new, right? Like, I don't know what to think. This is going to be really hard. Yet when they start experiencing that growth, and they sit at the end of the year and they look back and they're like, oh my God, I am so much better in having difficult conversations. I can now speak more confidently in front of a group. My mentorship skills have improved. They respect me because they know that I'm there to help them. They know that my philosophies, that my coaching, that my guidance to them is genuine. They also know that I'm not asking them to do anything that I don't do myself. So if I'm asking them to get up in front of the group and host a meeting, I'm part of that rotation. I'm doing it too, right? So they get to see me lead by example, and that's where some of that integrity comes in, and being consistent. Okay, so those are our 5 biggest mistakes that new leaders make. So let's review them one more time. It's micromanaging instead of empowering. It's avoiding difficult conversations. It's lack of self-awareness and emotional intelligence. Not setting clear priorities, And mistake number 5 was trying to be liked versus respected. As I said before, mistakes are going to happen. You are not expected to be perfect on day 1 in your leadership role. These 5 things, though, are ways that you can start working through how do you avoid them, practices that you can start building for yourself before you even get into that leadership role, so you know on day 1 how you want to handle it. It also gives you something that you can continue to check back into when you develop that journaling practice, so you can see how you're growing and progressing through them. These are all things that I help emerging leaders with in my Level Up Your Leadership program. And I love it because I get to see their growth. I know that leaders are setting themselves up for success right from the start when they invest in their development. And this is how we can build better and stronger leaders. So if that is something that you're interested in, connect with me on LinkedIn and let's chat about that today. I appreciate you tuning in this week, and I hope that you tune in with me each week as we work to level up your leadership this year. I know I shared with you the 5 biggest mistakes that leaders make. I would love for you to jump down in the comments and share with me, what mistakes have you made as a leader, or what do you feel like are the biggest mistakes that you made maybe early on in your leadership, or that you might be afraid to make when you get into that leadership role? Let's talk about it so that way we can all learn from each other, and maybe we'll have some great feedback that we can share that will help you work through that fear or worry of making that mistake. Until next time, my fellow leaders, lead with confidence, show up every day as the leader that you are striving to be, and make the decision today to level up your leadership this year. Thanks for listening to A Leader's Journey podcast. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. If you're excited to learn more, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and tune in next week for another exciting leadership lesson. I'd love to help you level up your leadership, achieve the goals you desire, and design your unique leadership journey. So click the link in the show notes to schedule a free Level Up Your Leadership session. During this time, we will define where you are in several key areas of leadership, where you desire to be, and how you can level up your leadership. You don't need to do this alone, so let's chat today and get your journey started. Don't forget to connect with me on LinkedIn or in the A Leader's Journey community on Facebook, and share this episode with another leader so we can all learn and grow together. That's all for this episode, and I'll see you next week. Until then, lead with confidence, show up every day as the leader you are striving to be, and make the decision today to level up your leadership this year.